Kickstarting my upcoming series of treatment reviews, we begin with hypnotherapy. Now, I never thought I'd experience a treatment like this in my life, and certainly not within this recovery journey, but through this method, I've been able to experience profound and fascinating benefits to my mental health. Now, the reason I tried hypnotherapy is, as I mentioned in a previous video, during my myofascial release treatments, I started to evoke quite severe emotions. So I was suggested to try some hypnotherapy to better access, but ultimately process those emotions. So off I went to see a recommended hypnotherapist. Now, there are two main methods within this practice. The first is suggestion therapy. Now, here you get put into a hypnotized state and the therapist does most of the talking. Now, the idea behind this is that in this state, you better access your subconscious mind, and it's your subconscious mind where your limiting beliefs, your insecurities, habits, unprocessed emotions and traumas are stored, and also you are more suggestible in this state. So ultimately more suggestible to incurring new behaviours and habits. And a common use case for this is people who are trying to quit smoking. Then the second method is hypnoanalysis, and this is what I experienced. And in fact, actually it's yourself, the patient, that does the most of the talking here. So the idea is that you get put into a hypnotized state, and the therapist will suggest you to think back to your past and to basically talk through whatever comes to mind, whatever personal memory, and start to process the emotions and feelings that you weren't able to at the time of that event. The way that he framed it to me is that we've kind of got this bucket full of anxieties and insecurities and unprocessed emotions that we wanted to empty through this process, and I guess these are almost acting as almost spanners in our works that are clogging our system and preventing our minds from flowing freely. So the objective is to try and process these emotions and tap into the subconscious where they're stored. So you might be thinking, what is it like to be hypnotized? Because I had no idea prior, and don't worry, it's not quite as dramatic as it may seem on TV. No one's going to click their fingers and all of a sudden you're under their control. In fact, you might actually not realize you're hypnotized. For those people that have meditated, I'd say it feels a similar sort of state to that, where you feel a bit spacey. And those that haven't meditated, I guess it's kind of the middle ground between being asleep and awake, again, where you feel quite drowsy when you come up from a nap. But again, quite often you might not realise that you're hypnotised and you're very much awake and conscious throughout the whole process. So what I wanted to do is actually to be quite open and transparent and give a couple of examples of things that came up during some of my treatment sessions. And some of the things that come up and aspects of your psychology or insecurities or unprocessed emotions that you're clinging onto that are impacting you that you have no idea, is quite stunning, to be honest. And I couldn't believe some of the things that came up for me. So I really want to give an example of something that came up for me and a childhood memory that I was able to process in the session. So before doing so, I just want to give a quick caveat that some of the details that I'm about to disclose might offend someone. That is not my intentions. I just want to give an honest reflection of a childhood memory which I was able to revisit and effectively reprocess in my mind. And before beginning, I just want to say, as I've mentioned in previous videos, that at this point my mental health was really in a bad way. I felt quite deep despair, desperation. I sort of lost faith, hope in myself, my own ability to overcome the situation and heal. I had a lack of clarity, a lack of confidence. So I very much went into this with open mind, to try and get the most out of the situation. So here goes. So as I mentioned, you get put into the hypnotized state at the beginning of the session, and then the therapist encourages you to think back to your childhood and just say whatever comes to mind. So I think this may be my fourth session. At the very beginning of the session, he asked me what comes to mind, and I remember being at my parents' wedding when I was around 3 or 4 years old, dancing on the dance floor. He's kind of asked me, how do you feel? I felt quite a warm and wholesome moment. I was able to express myself, and I don't know, maybe it felt like we were officially a family for the first time. I didn't know I felt this way at all. And then I remember picturing my grandma sitting on the edge of the dance floor with a big smile on her face, almost being quite proud of me dancing and getting a lot of attention on the dance floor. And it was just a really warm moment. And that memory finished, and he asked me kind of what's coming to mind now. And I remember saying, my grandma said my mind, but I'm not quite sure where. And he was like, it's okay, just keep thinking, keep remembering. And then I couldn't get my grandma out of my mind, but I couldn't really associate it with any memory. And then very quickly, I began to picture myself, or my grandma, taking me to the local school where I would have dance lessons. And I think maybe I was around 4 years old again, similar sort of age. I remember this one particular lesson that she took me to was ballet. And I brought up this memory, and the therapist is kind of encouraging me to remember how I felt. And I remember saying, I feel a bit confused, to be honest. I'm not too sure. And then very quickly, I realised actually the feeling that I was experiencing as a child at that time was confusion. I remember walking into the room as the only boy, thinking like, what am I doing here? Like, do I belong here, sort of thing? And this aspect, I had absolutely no idea I felt, but I was almost embarrassed to say to the therapist, but being completely honest and open with him, I said, well, I started to ask myself, does this make me gay? Like, I know I'm not gay, but I'd be okay with it if I was, but that's sort of the stereotype that comes with a little boy going to do ballet. And like, I remember my older brothers at the time saying to my mum, like, what are you taking him to dance classes for? He'll get the piss taken out of him. And I just remember like all these feelings started to come to surface, like, what did my friends think? Like, was my dad ashamed of me? And what did my mum know that I was doing ballet? Like, just all this like confusing feelings of maybe like guilt and shame in a weird way. And then as I was talking through this, my arms started to go really heavy, like lead, like bound down to the chair. And I remember telling this to the therapist, and I was like, it's okay, like just trying to think through what might that be indicating. So I started to think, and it's quite quickly it became clear that I realised, oh, it's almost like I've not been able to shake this image my whole life. It's almost like I feel like I've been walking around with a t-shirt saying like, I did ballet. Like, I remember in my teenage years, like my family and friends would sometimes joke like, I remember when you used to do ballet, and I never really thought anything of it. I didn't know that deep down it was something that was impacting me, but quite clearly it was. And yeah, it just felt like something I was never really being able to shake my whole life for whatever reason. And then as I started to think this through, I just burst out crying for 2 or 3 minutes. And once that came to an end, I thought back to that memory and felt nothing. And it was like I'd finally accessed that memory in my subconscious, processed it, and importantly, kind of integrated it into the wider context of my life and mind. And it no longer impacted me anymore, and it was gone. And that was one of many examples. Some were probably darker that I'm not willing to disclose on this forum, but some were much more surface level, like a girl that I went to school with that I haven't even thought of for probably 15 years that I fancied. I'm pretty sure she fancied me back, but I never did anything about it, and I felt a lot of guilt regarding that. So all sorts came up, but what was fascinating is that I ended up going for 8 sessions of this treatment, and interestingly, the first 7 sessions were all almost entirely negative feelings. Kind of the common themes for me were kind of masculinity, what it meant to be a man and complying to that, a sense of belonging, comfort in my own skin, and certain insecurities maybe about physical appearance or whatever it may be, letting down myself with my parents and my friends and my family, and they're all generally negative feelings. But in the 8th and what ended up being the final session, it's almost like the table turned entirely on its head, and whereas before I felt these negative feelings, I felt the reverse positive feelings. And I was starting to remember times in my life where I felt a sense of belonging and like friendship and camaraderie and team sports, and when I felt comfortable in my own skin, and memories of when I made my parents proud and made myself proud. And it was almost like, as the therapist said initially, I'd kind of almost emptied that bucket of insecurities and unprocessed emotions. And the way that I viewed it is almost like that, those spanners in the works that I was kind of processing and releasing, and enabling my mind to flow freely, and almost as if consequently my authentic self began to emerge, and with that became a drastic turn in my mental health, and I started to feel overwhelmed with positive feelings. And as I said in the previous video, a sense of clarity as to who I am, and that the external pressures which I let impact me so much don't matter at all. And I got overwhelmed with these feelings of, if I wanted to quit my job tomorrow, I could. Or if I wanted to down tools and go travelling for 3 or 4 years, I could. And if I wanted to sell my flat because I no longer wanted the financial commitment of my mortgage, I could. Like, if I wanted to, I don't know, quit drinking and do my own thing in that sense, like, that's a possibility. And I'm not saying I'm going to do any of those things. I don't know what my life's going to look like when I heal. But I was just engulfed with these feelings of endless possibility that I'd previously blocked off in my life due to the external pressures that were applied to me and applied to us all, but were innately impacting us. And then I started to get a sense of like clarity and confidence in myself, and confidence in my own ability to heal. And even though I'm in chronic and often debilitating pain, I just had complete faith and reassurance that I am going to get right, and patience as to how long that will take, and trust in the process, and knowing that my body will heal when it heals. I'm doing all I can, and just my outlook on life just completely shifted. And now I can't attribute 100% of this to the hypnotherapy. As I mentioned, my myofascial release therapy also had profound benefits to my mental and physical health, but I know for sure that the hypnotherapy played a huge part. But I was just simply fascinated how the mind worked, and that for example, in the specific example I gave, that it's almost as if my family's wedding was used as a way to anchor me towards my grandma, who then was used as an anchor to tap into this like deep held insecurity that I didn't even know I was holding on to. But these have all now gone, and I feel so much more freer and liberated as a result. And yeah, going through this experience, I really believe that this could have profound benefit to anyone, because before my hip operation, I'd felt like I'd lived a fairly normal, stable upbringing without too much struggle or trauma, but quite clearly there were many things that I was clinging on to. And the thing is, we don't know, because it's deep in our subconscious, and we're always in our conscious mind, especially in the busy, distracted lives that we live. And I was able to feel them, process the feelings, and let go. And yeah, I can't believe the benefits it's had, to be honest. And I would recommend to anyone, if you're simply curious, to give a session or two a go and see what it's like. Whether you have mental health issues or not, I think it could be great for anyone. And if anyone has had any experiences, any questions, I'd love to hear from you, because I'm simply fascinated by this. So please reach out. And yeah, thanks for listening to my first treatment review. I wasn't intending to do this, but if I was to give it a rating, I'd give it 10 out of 10. And tune in for future videos within the series. Thanks.